I'm in the big leagues, told him don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh, send it through quickly. I'm making his dog, like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog. I'm riding a road, y'all. I think that I'm back in my bag now. So I need that go, y'all. Got hits when he throwing the fastball. Just too quick for it, peeling off like the whip orange. Seen they effort, this piss poor. I got too much, I got a 10.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Another Turnover, the basketball podcast where a basketball fan with zero basketball credibility gives his opinions on what's going on in the NBA. Opinions that nobody asked for. As always, I am your host, Mr. Chris Aaron Murphy, aka Aaron. And ladies and gentlemen, let's just jump into it. Folks, we got a lot of stuff to discuss today, so I'm anticipating this show being just a little bit longer than it normally is. But yesterday was the NBA trade deadline. So trade deadline for all of my non-hoops fans, which I don't know why you're listening to this if you're a non-hoops fan, but the trade deadline basically means yesterday was the last day where teams are eligible to make trades for the remainder of the season. So if there's a player or draft picks that you're trying to get, you have to do it by February 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So that was yesterday. And boy, was there a lot of things that went down, not just yesterday, but earlier in the week as well. So we're going to talk about all of that. So let's get right into it. Obviously, the biggest headline that we have to talk about first is the trade between the Brooklyn Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers. So the 76ers will receive James Harden and Paul Millsap from Brooklyn in exchange for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, a 2022 first-round pick, as well as a 2027 first-round pick. So this was a bombshell. Like, this had been rumored for a few days. It was, well, maybe like a week or something like that. This had been rumored that this was going to go down. But yesterday, when the alerts started coming in, oh my goodness. Like, I was at work, and just some of my buddies at work, you know, are basketball fans like I am. And I was like, oh, I got to go tell somebody. Like, I was out there, I had to look for a couple of my friends. I was like, did you just see this come through? Did you see this come through? Like, that was a massive, massive trade and massive deal that got done between those two teams. So I would give these teams, I gave every team a grade for all of these trades. There's about 11 trades that we're going to go through. So I'm going to try to go as in-depth but thoroughly as I can. So I gave the 76ers for this trade a B-. Reason I gave him a B-, my rationale of thinking. So you get rid of Ben Simmons, which is a good thing. Like, Ben Simmons wasn't playing for you at all this season, and more than likely wasn't going to play, you know, after the deadline if they hadn't moved him. So you get rid of Ben Simmons, and that Ben Simmons will he, won't he drama is finally over. That's a good thing. Another good thing, you do have James Harden, who reports are saying that he will opt into the final year of his deal, which is $47 million. He will opt into that for next year. So you have James Harden for the remainder of this year and next year. And I'm sure that was probably a part of the deal. Like, hey, James, if we get this deal done, we need a commitment from you for at least through next year, which reportedly he's giving it to them. So he is good for next season as well. You did have to give up two solid rotational pieces in Seth Curry and Andre Drummond, who I think will fit. I think the Sixers will end up kind of missing that depth. It'll really end up helping Brooklyn, though. You did keep your younger talent, though, like Matisse Thybulle and Tyrese Maxey. They were both rumored to be in the deal. Brooklyn was rumored to want both of them, but you were able to keep both of them. So shout out to you for that. So overall, like I said, I give it a B- trade. I mean, James Harden is the best player in the deal. So when you get the best player, I mean, you know, like people say, who wins the trade? I'm like, well, technically whoever gets the best player. But James Harden is 33, going on 34. I'm sure after his deal is up after next season, he will be wanting a max or near max deal. And whether Philly will be willing to give that to him remains to be seen. If they end up winning the championship, I could see that. I could see them giving him that full max deal. But if they don't, like, let's say they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and lose, or make it to the finals and lose, maybe not. We will have to see how him and Joel Embiid will mesh together. I mean, I could see their pick and roll being pretty deadly, but we'll see. Obviously, it's both contingent on both of them being healthy as well. If you're Brooklyn, I gave Brooklyn an A- in this trade. You got a pretty solid return for Harden, like 2 first-round picks, 3 solid players. I mean, Ben Simmons is an all-star. Like, I know he's had his struggles, but Ben Simmons is an all-star. And you got him on the under contract for the next 4 years, which is pretty nice. I do believe with Simmons pairing along with KD and Kyrie as him being primarily just a facilitator, like, he doesn't have to score at all. He obviously, we know him mainly for his playmaking ability and his defensive prowess. So I think he's gonna mesh well with them. We'll see, obviously. But like I said, getting 2 first-round picks, they actually gave up, Brooklyn that is, gave up 2 first-round picks to get James Harden last year, if you remember correctly. So they got 2 first-round picks back. So that was pretty nice. So they got those, picks that they ended up giving up back for James Harden. So obviously, like I said, that was the biggest trade that happened that we definitely had to talk about first on the show. Ben Simmons for James Harden. Which is pretty wild. I do believe that both teams came out, although I gave the Sixers a B-, I think both teams came out relatively well with the situation that is warranted. Because if you're Brooklyn, you could have risked losing James Harden and potentially Kyrie Irving, because he could opt out of his deal, for nothing this summer. Like, if you're Brooklyn, you couldn't have let that happen. At least you got Ben Simmons now under contract for the next 4 years, and we'll see how it goes. So it should be pretty interesting to see what happens. But let's get into the next trade. This is a pretty big one as well, and big in terms of how many teams were involved. This is a 4-team trade. So the Milwaukee Bucks will be receiving Serge Ibaka from the Clippers, as well as a 2nd-round pick from Sacramento and Detroit, and cash considerations from the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers are going to be receiving Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye from Milwaukee, as well as, I'm going to say this wrong, Vanja Marinkovic from Sacramento. The Kings will be getting, they got a haul. Kings are getting Dante DiVincenzo from Milwaukee, Josh Jackson from Detroit, Trey Lyles from Detroit, David Michonneau from the Clippers, as well as a 2nd-round pick from Detroit. And the Detroit Pistons will be receiving Marvin Bagley from Sacramento. So this is a pretty big trade that came out closer in the morning time yesterday. Pretty big, like I said, in terms of how many teams were involved. I'm going to go through my grades. So for the Bucks, I gave them a B. They got a solid player in, Serge Ibaka, although he's a bit older now. They needed some size, needed some defense, and he's still pretty good on the defensive end and can stretch the floor and hit that open 3-point shot. So they had some size, because Brook Lopez potentially could be out, longer than anticipated. Dante was a good player for them. It sucks that they had to end up giving him up. I really, really liked him in their rotation. I think it's going to kind of hurt them now, because last night Pat Connaughton in the game against the Suns got hurt. And Dante was going to be getting more of his minutes. So kind of sucks for the Bucks, but I think they'll still end up being okay, being formidable in the Eastern Conference. They weren't really doing much with Rodney and Semi Ojeleye, so that wasn't a big factor for me. In terms of the Clippers, I gave them a B- overall for this trade. This doesn't really do much for them, because there's another trade that I'm going to talk about later on the show that both of those players kind of fill those roles. So other than that, I gave them a B- overall. They had to give up, they gave up cash, and they gave up Serge Ibaka, who was a solid rotational piece for them. So that's why I gave them a B-. The Kings, I give an A+ to. And the reason for that is you get a really, really solid player in Dante DiVincenzo, as well as Josh Jackson, who has, I guess, not necessarily lived up to expectations when he came out of, Kansas, if I'm not mistaken. But he's only been in the league about 3-4 years, if I'm not mistaken. He could potentially turn into a solid rotational piece, where Dante DiVincenzo, you're getting a solid rotational piece. So they got some solid players, and they got a 2nd-round pick, and didn't have to give up too much to get all of that. So I gave them an A+. Detroit Pistons, I'm giving a B- to. They gave up some picks to get Marvin Bagley, who hasn't fit well with Sacramento, and maybe will fit well alongside Cade Cunningham and Jeremy Grant in Detroit. Obviously, that remains to be seen, obviously because it just happened yesterday. But I give him a B- overall. Marvin Bagley, I mean, he's okay, but let's see if he gets a new situation, change the scenery, if that helps him out at all. But that was the second trade that happened yesterday. Third trade is a smaller one between the Celtics and the Rockets. So the Celtics are receiving Daniel Tice, who, if you remember correctly, used to play for the Celtics a couple of years ago. The Rockets will be getting Dennis Schroeder, Enes Freedom, now formerly known as Enes Kanter, Enes Freedom, and Bruno Fernando, but we don't talk about Bruno. So this was an interesting trade. I gave the Celtics overall an A because they're getting a player back that they used to have who doesn't really have to learn too much of the offense or the schemes or whatnot, although they have a new coach now in Ime Udoka. So they get a pretty solid, a big, I'm sure he's probably going to come off the bench and back up Robert Williams, which makes sense for them. The Rockets are getting a pretty solid point guard, Dennis Schroeder, who I guess will come off the bench. Oh, I gave the Rockets a B overall for this trade. Dennis Schroeder's probably going to come off the bench, I would assume, behind Kevin Porter Jr., but may start at times, depending on injury or whatnot. So it was interesting that they traded for him because they've got quite a bit of guards already. But overall, Enes Freedom, or a.k.a. Enes Kanter, I don't know why they traded for him because he got waived. So there's that. And like I said, we don't talk about Bruno. But that was a pretty smaller trade from yesterday between the Celtics and the Rockets. Celtics are getting back a player that they used to have. But that wasn't the best trade that the Celtics made, which I will get into later on in the show. But let's keep it moving. So the fourth trade that I wanted to talk about was a pretty good one. The Dallas Mavericks and the Washington Wizards. So the Mavericks are going to receive Spencer Dinwiddie from Washington, as well as Davis Bertans, former Spurs. Shout out to my former Spurs players. They will be getting them from the Wizards. The Wizards will be receiving Kristaps Porzingis and a 2022 second-round pick via Dallas. So this was a pretty interesting one. I was like, oh, wow. The Dallas Mavericks, I know the pairing of Porzingis and Luka hasn't worked out the way Dallas expected. Luka just controls so much of the offense, and Kristaps Porzingis pretty much was a spot-up three-point shooter, and that just wasn't the role that he wanted to play, which understandably so. He can do a lot more. I give the Mavericks overall an A because they got the best player in this trade, Spencer Dinwiddie. Although he's had somewhat of a down year, he is known to drop buckets. He can get you 18 to 20 points a night. So you get another scorer paired along with Luka Doncic. You also basically get the shooting that Kristaps Porzingis had with Davis Bertans. He's a really, really good three-point shooter. As far as the Wizards go, the Wizards get overall a B. I mean, this trade doesn't necessarily improve them. I mean, Kristaps Porzingis, like I said, is overall solid. We'll see. I mean, you're going to hear this a lot, but you'll see. Let's see how the change of scenery helps him out. Should be an interesting fit with Bradley Beal. Their pick and roll could be decent, depending on if that's how they want to run their offense. But at least they do get a draft pick. They get a second-round pick from Dallas, which could, turn into a gem. Manu Ginobili was a second-round pick, and we all know how he turned out. So that should be pretty interesting. But overall, like I said, I give the Mavericks an A for that trade, and I give the Wizards a B. Next trade that I want to talk about is between the Wizards again, but this time with the Charlotte Hornets. So the Hornets will be getting Montrezl Harrell from Washington. Wizards will be getting Vernon Carey Jr., Ish Smith, and a 2023 second-round pick. It was Boston's pick that they were given via Charlotte, which is pretty cool. So Hornets, for this trade, I give them an A. Montrezl Harrell is a really, really solid big man for today's game. Stretch the floor. He can stretch, not really a three-point shooter, but can stretch the floor decent enough, but gives you grit and gives you toughness and defense, what the Charlotte Hornets really, really need. So I give them an A for that trade. The Wizards, I give a B- to this one, and that's kind of me being generous. Ish Smith is a solid backup point guard, a solid rotational piece on anybody's team. So, yeah, I mean, Vernon Carey Jr., he's all right. At least you get another pick. You get a second-round pick, which is pretty nice. So that's kind of how I feel about that. So A for the Hornets, B- for the Wizards in that trade. This one involves my San Antonio Spurs. So let's talk about this one. They got a couple trades that I was kind of upset about. So I'm going to get into both of those. So the Raptors they're getting Thaddeus Young, Drew Eubanks, and a 2022 second-round pick via San Antonio. The Spurs will be receiving Goran Dragic and a 2022 first-round pick from Toronto. So, with that being the case, Thaddeus Young is going to be a solid veteran piece for Toronto, who is making a pretty good playoff push. They have been kind of hitting their stride recently. I can't remember exactly where they are at in the standings, but they were not doing so well starting off the season, but now they are doing pretty well. They got an all-star in Fred VanVleet that I talked about last week. So Thaddeus Young, going to be solid for them. Don't know why they traded for Drew Eubanks, because they waived him, so he's going to be, out in the market for somebody else to sign. Like I said, they add a solid vet. They waived Eubanks. They got a second-round pick, but you lost the first-round pick. So overall, I give the Raptors a C for this trade. Spurs not much better in this one. I give them a C+. They got Goran Dragic, but they waived him, or they're potentially working on a buyout. I don't know if it's been confirmed. I don't know if it's been confirmed that the buyout has gone through as of yet, but they're working on a buyout. So this is a show from a fan's perspective, so I just don't understand why trade for somebody. But, they did get a pick. They got a first-round pick. They flipped the second for a first. So, cool. Why not? But overall, this trade really didn't do much for either team. C and a C+ for both teams. But second Spurs trade that they were involved in, this is one I alluded to earlier, was with the Boston Celtics. So the Boston Celtics are getting Derek White. Oh, man, I'm going to miss Derek White. The Spurs will be getting Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, a 2022 first-round pick, a protected pick, and then a 2028 first-round pick, which seems like ages from now, 6 years from now, who knows what's going to happen in the NBA. But you do get 2 first-round picks, which is nice. Now, I give the Celtics an A. They definitely won this trade because Derek White is a really, really solid guard, and I think is going to pair nicely alongside Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Obviously, the Spurs and the Celtics, these are my 2 favorite teams, Spurs being my number 1, Celtics being my number 2, so I'm kind of torn with this because, I'm happy for the Celtics, but obviously I love my Spurs through and through. They're number 1 always. But Derek White is a really decent finisher, pretty decent shooter as well, but plays very solid perimeter defense. So they are getting some much-needed perimeter defense, which is obviously why they traded for him. So I give him an A. The Spurs, I give overall a B+. Josh Richardson is okay. He's an okay perimeter defender. He's not as good a shooter as Derek White is, so that kind of sucks. But he could be a good fit. The Spurs are known for getting the best out of all of their players with the team system that they play. I'm just going to miss Derek White. San Antonio loves them some Derek White, so it kind of sucks to see him go. But hey, we got 2 more first-round picks. So, setting ourselves up for the future, building around DeJounte Murray is what I am assuming is going to be the role going forward. So, that was the pick between the Celtics and the Spurs, 2 of my favorite teams. But let's keep moving forward. So the next few trades didn't happen yesterday. So those were majority of the trades that happened yesterday, at least the more notable ones. There were some other ones that happened that I didn't really get into. Feel free to read those at your leisure. But these are some of the trades that happened earlier in the week that I want to get into. So there was a couple of big ones. So the one that I want to talk about now is the trade between the Pacers and the Kings. So just the other day, I think it was February 8th, if I'm not mistaken. So Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it was. The Pacers are receiving Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson, while the Kings will be receiving Domantas Sabonis, Justin Holiday, Jeremy Lamb, and a 2023 second-round pick. So this is a pretty big trade that had a lot of people kind of scratching their heads, but definitely had a lot of people talking. So for this one, in terms of grades, I'm going to give the Pacers an A. Tyrese Halliburton could potentially be the best player in this deal. He's only This is his second year, I think? Maybe third? I think it's his second, if I'm not mistaken, though. He could potentially be the best player in this deal in terms of his ceiling and his upside. Buddy Hield, you got 2 solid young pieces. Buddy Hield, is pretty good. Really, really solid perimeter shooter. Can get to the rim as well and create his own shot. So he's pretty good, too. But a lot of people were confused as to why the Kings gave up Tyrese Halliburton and not potentially De'Aaron Fox, because I'm assuming De'Aaron Fox is their guy. They did give De'Aaron Fox max money, if I'm not mistaken, so maybe that's why they ended up keeping him or maybe couldn't find a suitable trade partner for him. But Tyrese Halliburton, I mean, his averages, I don't have them pulled up right this second, but very, very solid scorer, very solid playmaker, young on a rookie-friendly deal. So, like, a lot of people were baffled that Sacramento gave him up. Like, the reports were saying that a lot of teams didn't even know that he was available from Sacramento, and they were like, the deal you got, like, it's kind of questionable. Like, that being the case, I mean, the Sacramento Kings, I give them a B overall. Sabonis in this trade, Domantas Sabonis right now is the best player. It makes sense why they got him, because they did move on from Marvin Bagley, like we talked about earlier, trading him to the Detroit Pistons. Sabonis is a former All-Star, really, really solid. He can space the floor, pretty good playmaker, very similar to Jokic in that regard. Not as good as playmaker as Jokic is, but similar in terms of style. So, I mean, they did get the best player overall in this trade, but Tyrese Halliburton definitely has more upside. So this one was, like I said, kind of interesting on both sides. I mean, the Kings, they got some solid pieces, Justin Holiday and Jeremy Lamb as well. Jeremy Lamb, pretty decent rotational piece, but kind of interesting. I don't know why that the Kings, Spurs would have took Tyrese Halliburton if they were willing to deal, and we'd have gave you Derek White and a pick. But that was that trade that kind of had a lot of people talking. But let's move on. Let's talk about the Pelicans and the Blazers trade from the other day. So the New Orleans Pelicans will be receiving C.J. McCollum, Larry Nance Jr., and Tony Snell, while the Blazers would be receiving, they kind of got a lot, Josh Hart, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which they ended up flipping yesterday, the Blazers did, to shipping him to Utah, if I'm not mistaken. So they traded him. Thomas Satoransky, Didi Luzada, I know I'm not saying that right, and then 3 picks, a 2022 first-round pick protected, 2026 second-round pick, a 2027 second-round pick as well, whichever ends up being better between the teams. So, in terms of the Pelicans, I gave them a B-. They did get the best player in the deal, but they gave up quite a bit of their future in terms of picks, which is kind of baffling to me. C.J. McCollum is the best player, obviously, in the deal. You do add a solid scorer with Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, but there have been a lot of reports that Zion Williamson is definitely not confident in the Pelicans organization to put the best team around him, so he may not want to be there long term. Obviously, he hasn't asked for a trade or anything like that, because he hasn't played for all that much. He's only played like 80 games in the past 2 seasons or something like that. So, what's his reaction going to be like? Is he going to be cool with this trade or not? I'm sure they probably at least talk to him about it, but we'll see what happens. The Blazers get a C-. That's me being generous because I feel bad for them. Their roster is just not better. I mean, with the picks that they're getting, cool, you set yourself up somewhat for the future, but they've really failed. Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard's going to be 32 later on this season or later on this year, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm Damian Lillard, I've talked about it before in previous episodes. You got to ask out. You got to ask for a trade. It's just this. The Blazers have not shown you that they can build a team around you. Obviously, with the trade deadline being over, their roster is what it is for right now. You're not building a championship team in the summer. I don't have the confidence for them to build a championship team over the summer built around Damian Lillard. So if I'm Dame this summer, I'm like, hey, go ahead and find me a trade partner because I'm done. But this leads into the next trade. It also involves the Blazers. This time the Clippers are involved. The Clippers receive Norman Powell and Robert Covington, whereas the Blazers receive Eric Bledsoe, Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, and a 2025 second-round pick, so another pick for the Blazers. In terms of grade, I give the Clippers an A for this one. They get 2 solid perimeter players, adds to their defensive prowess, especially on the perimeter. Eventually, when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George come back, you've got some pretty good defense on the perimeter and some pretty good shooting with Norman Powell. He's able to get you about 16 to 18 points a night just based off his shooting alone. Blazers get another C. Me being generous again, same thing that I just talked about. Damian Lillard's got to leave. This team is not better than they were last year. The only upside that they have right now, you've got some picks, 2022, 2025, 2026, 2027, but by that point, 5 years from now, Damian Lillard is going to be in his late 30s? Like, was he going to wait till then for them to build a team? Like, absolutely not. So I mean, yeah, Damian Lillard, he's got to get out of there. He's got to get the heck up out of Portland. But last trade that happened last week was between the Cavaliers and the Indiana Pacers again. So the Cavaliers get Karis LeVert, who they had been coveting for quite some time, and a 2022 second-round pick, whereas the Pacers get Ricky Rubio and 3 picks. They get a 2022 first-round pick, which is protected in the lottery. You get a 2022 second-round pick and a 2022 second-round pick again. So great addition for the Cavaliers, who are definitely going to make the playoffs based on the way they've been playing. You got an all-star in Darius Garland. Great addition to their young core. He is going to be a solid scorer, solid piece for them. And I'll be curious to see what they do in the playoffs and who they end up matching up with, because that Cleveland team, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, they are formidable. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. As far as the Pacers, and I give the Cavaliers a B+ overall in their grade. Pacers I give a B+ too as well. They got Halliburton, they got Halliburton in the other trade that we talked about. I'm not sure why you need Ricky Rubio unless he's going to be backup to Tyrese Halliburton, which I'm assuming is probably what's going to happen. But you also got 3 picks, which is pretty nice. You even got a lottery protected pick for this summer, so which is pretty solid. So I mean, B+ is all around for all those teams. So that wraps up all of the trades that I wanted to kind of discuss. There were some other ones that I left out. Like I said, feel free to read about those at your leisure. But a pretty wild NBA trade deadline. I definitely think that this is one of the more memorable trade deadlines that we have in memories past, just with, trades that happened right as, the trade deadline was coming up. So, which was pretty fun to see all the alerts coming in. I had Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN Senior Insiders, tweet notifications turned on, and just tweets were coming in every couple minutes, and it was pretty fun to witness. But a couple more things that I want to talk about on today's show. Like I said, today's show will be just a little bit longer than it normally is. The All-Star Draft was yesterday on TNT. So Team LeBron, captains Team LeBron and Team Durant, picks were made for the All-Star game that's coming up next weekend. Hilarity ensued. I love, Inside the NBA is one of the best shows in television, with Chuck, Ernie, Shaq, and Kenny. And the main story narrative that came out from this was that Kevin Durant didn't want to pick James Harden because obviously they had just traded away from him, didn't want to play with him. So he ended up getting picked last. And Chuck, being the instigator that he was basically like, oh yeah, like, no, LeBron, like, make him sweat. Like, don't pick who you think. Like, and so Kevin Durant ended up picking Rudy Gobert over James Harden. So James Harden was the last pick who will be on Team LeBron, which hilarious. I thought it was so funny. But let's talk about the teams. I'll break it down real briefly to see whose team I think is better. So as far as Team LeBron, you have your starters. Obviously, LeBron will be starting. He's got Giannis Antetokounmpo, Steph Curry, Wardell, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Jokic. Pretty formidable starting 5. I definitely like his starting 5. Reserves, he's got Luka Doncic, Darius Garland, of course. I mean, he had to pick the Cleveland guy because obviously LeBron's a Cleveland guy. Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell, Fred VanVleet, and like I mentioned, James Harden. So pretty solid team for LeBron. He's always, with him getting the first pick, he arguably always has the best team. He is 4-0 as the captain since they changed this format. But Team Durant, obviously Kevin Durant is injured, so he won't be starting in the game. But his starters are Joel Embiid, Ja Morant, Jason Tatum, Trae Young, and Andrew Wiggins. So not as good a starting 5 as LeBron's, but, solid nonetheless. Reserves will be Devin Booker, Karl-Anthony Towns, Zach LaVine, DeJounte Murray, Chris Middleton, LaMelo Ball, and Rudy Gobert. So overall, I think, based off the teams, I think LeBron has the better starting 5. Kevin Durant does have the better reserves. He's got bucket getters and Devin Booker, LaVine. He's got DeJounte Murray from San Antonio. So you get some points from me for that, Kevin Durant, for picking DeJounte Murray, especially picking him early as well. So that will be the All-Star teams. Team LeBron versus Team Durant. should be pretty fun and exciting for next week. Looking forward to watching it. But last thing that's going to be on the docket for today are the marquee matchups. Last weekend, I went a perfect 3-0 for my marquee matchup. So had the Spurs beating the Rockets because, of course, you had the Miami Heat beating the Charlotte Hornets and the Dallas Mavericks beating the Atlanta Hawks. So I picked all three correctly. Brings my season total to 19-11. So I'm on the come up, y'all. I'm getting away from 500. So this weekend I got 3 games, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that I think you should check out, that I think will be the best games for the weekend. Obviously, it's Super Bowl weekend. It's not a whole lot of people going to be watching basketball, but it is what it is. Obviously, this is a basketball show, and that's what we're here to discuss. So the Denver Nuggets taking on the Boston Celtics. I've got the Celtics winning that game. Obviously, they're my second favorite team. They have let me down multiple times before that I picked them, but I'm gonna keep picking them. It's like that TikTok trend. That's my man's, and I'm gonna stick beside him. But I got the Lakers taking on the Warriors. Gonna pick the Warriors to beat the Lakers in that game. Lakers have been trash recently. Warriors have been surging. The Timberwolves are taking on the Pacers in a battle of 2 young bucks. I don't know if the Pacers, if Halliburton or whatnot is going to be ready just yet. So I will be picking the Timberwolves, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards as well. I will be picking them to win this game as well as D'Angelo Russell. But those are the picks that I have. That is actually going to be my show for the day as well. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit longer. Appreciate you sticking with me. Like I said, all the good things every single week. If you could like, share, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment on the podcast, either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I hope you enjoy the Super Bowl that's coming up. It should be pretty fun. We're going to get some wings, some pizza, some chips and dip, all that good stuff. But I hope you have a wonderful, fun, safe weekend. I will see you next Friday. Take care. Peace.
Asking how I built a brand. Told him put a check up in my hands. Still got time, no cap. Made a few checks, but they all in the raps. Had a few friends, but they suck in the past. I don't even trip when I'm thinking about that. Hopped in the whip and we all in black. Shawty wanna ride till the hop in the back. 0 to 100, seen a rap on the dash. They ain't catching up, dog, I'm moving too fast. I'm in the big leagues. Told her don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston. Ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh.